Hello and welcome to the Connection Compass. I am your host, Andrea Louise Evans. I'm very excited to bring you the very first interview on the Connection Compass. This week we welcome Emma Conally Barklem, author, award-winning poet, yoga teacher and grief worker, for conversations on life, yoga journeys, connecting to creativity, moving past rejection and writing brave. Welcome to the Connection Compass podcast. I'm really happy that you're here. I have been following you for a while on Instagram now, and I have a sneaky suspicion that you enjoy life. You love life.
I do. I'm not going to lie. I do, Andrea. It's lovely to be here. And thank you for inviting me onto this show. I love the title of it, Connecting to Creativity. It's fantastic. It's what I'm all about. And yes, enjoying life is definitely a big part of that for me.
Like, why do you think that is? Is it just your life ethic? You know, something that you've grown up with all the whole time to appreciate life and just grab it kind of while you can. Is it that for you? And have you always had it?
I haven't always had it. So when I was kind of in the rat race, as we do, we're kind of socialized to do certain things, tick certain boxes, university, job, marriage, car, mortgage, all that stuff. So while I was doing all that stuff, I was an academic. I was very much blinkered. And even though obviously I am a yogi, I was practicing yoga, I kind of swallowed that that's what I needed to do. And then I lost my grandma in 2012, and I was very close to my grandma. And that was kind of the first kind of wake up call of what am I doing? I'm just kind of sleepwalking a bit through my own life. I need to live now, because it was, I suppose, the first real loss that I'd experienced. So that was kind of a wake up call. I went on a retreat. I thought, I love yoga. I'm going to retrain. I just thought about it very spontaneously, retrained alongside my full time job as a lecturer, and then kind of left. And yeah, part of it was the yoga thing. I'd spent a lot of time walking. I always use this example of a spider web. So I used to, I'm lucky enough where I live, I was able to walk into work. So I walked into work often just with my head down, scurrying, thinking about how I need to get there. And then when I went part-time, I had more time, just more relaxed. I was practicing quite a lot, and I suddenly started to notice the things on the way into work. And one day I just noticed the intricacy of this spider's web. And I'd never really noticed it before or anything like it. I'd just been kind of in a bit of a wind tunnel. So there was the yoga awakening where you start to look around you and you start to take things in, you start to take a step back. So there was that going on, but I still felt like you do in your 20s, pretty, invincible, life's going to last forever. So it wasn't until really the last few years that I really had it kind of a big slap in the face with the death of my mother that, oh, I need to live now. And more to the point, I need to enjoy my life now because I don't know what's around the corner. And so people say these things all the time, but I hadn't really felt it until that point. A lot of processing, a lot of grieving to do, which I did. I did during the pandemic. There was kind of a very dormant period, and that's when I started writing, actually. So really since then, and then the loss of my father, which was unexpected last year. So it was kind of, right, bring on the enjoyment. I need to crack on here because I don't know how long I've got left. And also I feel like I'm living three lives, their lives were cut short. So I need to do all the things that they like to do as well, to sing, to dance under the stars on a cruise ship, to enjoy cocktails, to travel the world, just to do all the things that I want to do and to do them now and to somehow, whatever the money, whatever the financial limitations, to somehow make it happen. And so far, I've managed, even though I'm purely freelance, and we know how uncertain that can be, I've managed to make that happen. So yeah, I think that's where it comes from, the life is short thing.
I certainly recognize what you're saying in relation to the tick boxing, and that was something I was going to ask you about, actually, because in one of your lovely poems in the book The Write-ins, you use a line and I thought it was really powerful, and it was in the Sis poems, and it says, to blow a hole through the conceit that little boxes can hold us. And there is a lot of tick boxing these days. I feel that really constricts for me. I feel I feel enraged by the tick boxes actually, and I just because I feel it demeans human life and who we are and what we are and our possibility and potential, and the fact that as we move through life, we we change so much anyway, don't we?
Absolutely,
You
yeah.
know,
Hmm.
yeah. Is that something that resonates with you as well? And
Yeah, I've always kind of felt allergic to being put in a box. So as soon as somebody wants to put me in a box, I bristle. So, and there's a lot of boxes that, that I'm in, working class, I take that one. Are you black? Are you white? No, I'm biracial. Are you gay? Are you straight? Well, I've been married to a man. I'm going to marry a woman. I don't like labels. I don't know. Am I queer? I don't know. So there's kind of, I always find them reductive. And I always feel, obviously, as humans, we're complex, intricate, wonderful beings. And we're also always greater than the what the boxes that we're put into. So sometimes the boxes work, in publishing. There's a big drive at the moment, working class, queer, people of color, please apply to the publishing world, please submit your work. So sometimes it works. And I suppose it's about addressing the majority, isn't it? So in the publishing world, it's very difficult to break into. So if you're classed as marginalized as I am because of all those categories, then actually you need somebody to do something very specific with boxes in order to enable you to break into that world. Similarly with the yoga world, there are more now, but when I started, there certainly weren't many biracial queer yoga teachers around, and I was trained very traditionally with a British wheel for 4 years, and I was entering a very middle class Caucasian world, which I tried to, I suppose, disrupt from the inside because I'm a rebel as well. I think most yogis are rebels. You're outside of society. You've already rejected how society is telling you to live. And I've never liked authority or rules and regulations. I just bristle. So for me, it was about being able to teach on my own terms. And it's never actually been, it's never been an issue, and I realized after a time teaching with the boxes that actually people get to know you very quickly as a human being in a class. And just the fact that I am those labels teaching a class, usually of mainly white middle class people, well to do people, I've already broke in. They already accept me as a teacher. So it's kind of the job's done in a sense. So the next kind of lesbian biracial teacher who comes along, it won't be such a whoa, she's a bit weird. It'll be like, oh, well, we had Emma and, we stayed with Emma for in some cases, 13, 14 years, So I think you can disrupt without actually engaging with the boxes just by being yourself.
yeah, that's really true. And it really your journey into yoga is a little bit similar to mine in that I was very academic too. I was 35 when I left the education system. So I didn't do particularly well at school, I have to say. I really only started excelling in my 20s, but then, you go through the house buying through the motions of life and you get caught up in renovations and things and well, I did actually sell my house and go traveling. Did actually sell my house and go traveling.
That's very radical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I gave up my job as well. Yeah, yeah, it was. But and I remember being really worried that I was going to be one of the oldest people that were doing that. But actually, it was everybody who was my age. So I was around kind of 30, I was 31 when that happened. But it was lots of people that had gone through life, gone to school, college, university, they were married, got, houses and things. And then they just hit a brick wall for whatever reason and just felt that they couldn't do it anymore and they took some time out. But I think even when that kind of brought me back into writing, because I kind of blogged my way around the world, but it was the death of my grandma, so 2009,
Mm,
and that was a real wake-up call for me. And it was like, well, I was still studying at the time, and I was like, well, I don't want to be sat at this table anymore. I don't want to be sat here like focused on this one topic, you know. I want to kind of break out and I want to do other things. And that was a wake-up call for me. And
mm,
something similar, you know, I want to live life, don't want to be sat at this table anymore.
mm.
No.
Yeah, really similar then, because I had the same sense. I just had a look around one day in the classroom. I was like, do I want to spend my life in this grey box and kind of have no energy until, well, just have the energy completely leached out of me, basically, and then just be like a shell when it comes to seeing my friends and my family. I'm just like, I'm sorry, I'm in my pajamas for the weekend. You know, I ain't doing anything. And that's kind of what my life was like for 13 years. And it's like, it's a big chunk, isn't it? But then once you see, you can't unsee. Once you kind of realize, then that's kind of the turning point, I think.
Was you an academic in university, were you, Emma?
Yeah, so I actually had a scholarship to do a master's when I was in my very early 20s. So that was I was on track. I wanted to be a professor. That was my thing. I wanted to be a doctor and a professor of English. I had wanted to be a writer. I'd said very clearly when I was 3, apparently. My brother reminded me of this when I was doing the publicity for the writing. He says, do you know, Emma, can you remember when mom told me when you were 3, you announced that you were going to be a writer and you didn't want children and you were going to travel the world? And then, of course, you go to school, you go to those careers meetings. They say, not very practical, probably not going to earn any money doing that. Why don't you go into academia? Why don't you go into teaching? So that's when I took that route, you see. And of course, the irony is, 44 years later, I've come back to the original dream by hook or by crook.
Yeah, that's really lovely because again, there's a really lovely line that you use right at the beginning of the book around kind of recognizing yourself or meeting yourself again when you're older. So, see, maybe I was always a poet. Sometimes we meet ourselves further down the line and say, oh, yes, I remember you. I thought that was really lovely. And why do you think we lose ourselves? What is it that do you think we just kind of get carried in the way of life? And I don't know, sometimes you see people, and it may not be the case, but sometimes it feels like they're living a very linear life. And I think when you don't live a very linear life,
Mm.
you know, you can feel that, I don't know, you really start to struggle with that sense of belonging. And you know, what are your thoughts around that? Why do you think we lose ourselves, perhaps?
I think a lot is conditioning. I think there is that kind of merry-go-round of education in the UK, and then the expectations of what you're meant to do afterwards, all the way through to pension. So your whole life is kind of this structured, and you don't actually get to enjoy yourself until what you're in your 70s. And there's so much assumption, I think, built into that you're going to be well. There's so many people who stop working and immediately get ill, and then whoa, that's the life, it's gone, you know. So I think it starts off from childhood. I think also, obviously, just the usual things you'd expect: socialization from your parents, the influences around you. I was fortunate in that I had a very inspirational English teacher who kind of plucked me out of wherever I was heading and, you know, took me to the theatre, introduced me to the world literature. She could see the potential in me. And that kind of led really to me having the confidence then to go to university, and then to actually get a scholarship was amazing. Then I realized, oh, actually, I must be half decent at this. So it's kind of, I think it's a mixture of different pressures. For me, I just feel incredibly fortunate to have had that wake up pill with the yoga journey, because that's immediately what it does. You know, it breaks you down, it searches you out, and then it says, okay, so what you're going to do now? Now you know this. Now you know that a lot of this is an illusion. And I just don't think people get exposed to that. I think I was searching, definitely. I was in a place where I needed to find yoga at that point. A lot was going wrong for me at that point. So I think being introduced to something like that obviously shifts you massively. But I think also we have to take personal responsibility. You know, if we just kind of float through or passively through our own lives, then we can become a victim very easily. You know, you were talking about the linear path. it's very easy to get carried away on that trajectory. And I think it's very difficult to break out of it as well. Like you did, to sell your house and say, whatever, I'm going to travel the world, or to decide as a woman not to have children and deal with the constant pressure and the questions of that, just to do anything outside of the box. I think people find threatening because it makes them then inspect their own lives, and actually taking, the archetype, the road less traveled, can be quite a lonely thing as well, because there's not that many of you doing it. But then the people who are doing it usually tend to be leaders, natural leaders, and then they end up kind of accumulating a tribe around them, similar, like-minded people. So I think if you are that type of person, you can use it in a very positive way.
That is really interesting, and definitely something that resonates me about being on the path less traveled and it being quite lonely and quite isolating, and how you don't always fit in situation. You don't always fit in
Which is
situation.
great not to fit. I would worry now if I fit in anywhere. I'd know something had gone wrong for me if I started to fit in. But I think when you're a child or you're younger, it's quite a difficult thing. And I spent a lot of time trying to fit in, say the right things, wear the right things, be interested in the right things. I spent a lot of time trying to do that. And then there was a point when I just thought, no, this is me, this is who I am, I've been made this way, and I'm going to fully embrace it, and just also shout out all the other rebels, weirdos, lonely people, black sheep that there are, because usually those are the people, those are the creatives, those are the people making a change in the world.
It's really inspirational and empowering for people to hear, I think, as well. I had to say I'm probably really guilty. I haven't always really celebrated kind of not fitting in, to be honest with you. I've always felt really awkward and, a little bit like, oh, I'm not quite fitting here in this situation. But I think I probably appreciate it more now.
Yeah,
It's brought me to where I am
exactly.
doing this.
Exactly.
I would never ever have done this. Like, if I hadn't have had the experiences or felt the way that I had kind of like growing up, and, so it's really nice to hear that from somebody else who hasn't led a linear path. Really, that's lovely. Just going back to yoga, I I really kind of went into yoga because I was experiencing lots of panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And it was kind of returning to the breath that really grounded me and anchored me and really helped me to, I suppose, to come home to myself, really. And then as the yoga practice started to develop, I started to become more creative. I had this really bonkers dream. I'm going to be interviewing my yoga teacher, who I did my yoga teacher training with in a few weeks.
Wow.
I had this really bonkers dream about being in yoga class and being covered in scales. It sounds really bonkers.
Okay.
And as I was practicing yoga, they were just falling away.
Mm.
And it was almost like through yoga, I started to become more, the stuff that wasn't me was kind of falling away, and this real creative person just started to started to appear. And you, on your Instagram, you put something really nice.
I don't know what's coming.
It's something really, really nice. Yoga runs the deeper than the mechanics of the body.
Yes, Monday's post. Yeah.
Yeah, Monday post. Thought that was really powerful because it does go deep, doesn't it?
Very deep.
If you allow it to.
If you allow, well, that's the key thing, isn't it? And to be honest, there was a point when I didn't allow it to. It was too much. In my 20s, I went into a full immersion with my first yoga teacher, who was amazing and really facilitated my practice. I had a lot going on. I had back issues. I was off work with stress. I was in the obesity category, so I was finding movement very difficult. And she'd really facilitated an Ashtanga practice. I had no clue what class I was walking into, and she somehow facilitated a full Ashtanga primary series. And for me as a teacher now, that was very, inspiring for me. And that's certainly something I replicate when I teach to facilitate people from chairs, etc., etc. But yeah, I don't know what point I was making. I've forgotten.
That it goes deep, that it can go
Deep.
very deep.
That's it. So yeah, so I signed up for all her classes. It was just one payment a month. So I was like, okay, show me all the yoga. I'm going to do all of it. I'm going to do all of it. Going to do all of it. She introduced me to the 8 limb path, Patanjali, Yoga Sutras, all of that deep business. And then I was like, I got to a point. I'd moved to a different part of the country. I was like, I can't do this. There's too much. There's too much I'm going to have to deal with now in myself with these 8 limbs. I felt very overwhelmed. Like, oh my God, it's a whole way of life. Now I'm going to go and party. Maybe I'll come back to you at some point. So I went and partied for maybe 4 years, something like that. Out drinking, dancing, partying. And of course, after a certain time, I started to feel pretty empty and all the reasons that I'd actually started yoga in the first place. So I kind of came crawling back like a penitent child and said, hi, yoga, do you remember me? Can you sort me out again, please? And really from, I suppose, my mid-30s, I've been on the path, 8 limb path ever since. It's the only path that brings me any kind of peace in life. And then I met my heart, what I call my heart teacher, pretty late on. 2017, I did my Ashtanga training with him. I tracked him down. I'd seen him on a DVD. He'd modified the whole of Ashtanga. I loved the way Ashtanga made me feel, but I realized a lot of people wouldn't be able to practice it because of the bodies they were in. He brought out his manual, like world famous manual. He's one of the original students of Ashtanga yoga with the creator of it. So I was like, I need to track this guy down. I was scared. I was like, oh my God, what's he going to have me doing? But it was the best thing I could have done, going out of my comfort zone. I tracked him down, said, I want to do some training with you. He said, great, I'm in Edinburgh, come up. I spent a week with him, 9 days with him, practicing solidly from 8 till 9 o'clock at night, learning the whole thing, the Sanskrit, but also just observing him as a yogi, as a practicing yogi, and benefiting from his wisdom, which there was also a hell of a lot of humor, which I hadn't really experienced with other teachers before. It was all quite intense and serious. And he really worked. He just made you laugh the whole time. And, yoga was a joy. So I was deep again. I was like, wow, this is my path. Qualified with him, kept in touch with him and his wife. His wife helped me through grief and different things. And it was like, yeah, this is my path. I don't know if you found this. Did you find when you first started that you were trying to fit in a yoga box? Because I tried to fit in the vegetarian, green juice, skinny, I'm peaceful all the time. I don't swear. I'm just some kind of earth mother. I tried to fit into this box, and of course that couldn't last. And I think it was a new teacher thing.
I would say no.
I'm good for you.
Not for me. I think I've always, for some reason, and I don't know why this is, because I wouldn't have always said I work from my intuition. Later in life, I would have said, yes, I definitely work with my intuition. But there was something about it that didn't quite resonate with me, the whole, kind of vegetarian, I don't know what it is, and I don't know why it didn't resonate me, but I didn't try and fit in with that box. For me, it was very much about the feeling and just being in the feeling of yoga. And when I practice yoga, I go very quickly into a space. So because focusing on the breath really resonated with me from the beginning, that's all I focused on. So I didn't really care much about my postures. I mean, I obviously moved in and out of postures, but for me, it was just all about the breath. And when I focused on the breath, something happened, and very opened me out creatively. And that's what my yoga journey has been about, really, as opposed to, the theory, the 8 limbs of yoga, it's, you read it and, you identify with it and you try and do it as much as possible. But I'm staying more kind of intuitively led with it about what feels good, what feels right for my body. So I suppose from that point of view, I'm not really that much of a hardened yogi, but,
But what does that
but
mean? What does a hardened yogi mean?
well, I suppose I mean a textbook yogi, a text.
But no, but this is the thing. I don't think that exists. I think I was trying to pursue an ideal that doesn't exist. For me, the breath had been the thing because I've been in hospital with my back. I couldn't move. So the asana practice was impossible. So for me, the breath had always been the heart of the practice, which is what I say constantly in class. Your body's going to come and go, the vagaries of the body. Just because you can do this week, you're not going to be able to do it next week, etc. Don't attach to the postures, else you're going to be miserable. Attach to the breath. So that's my whole thing. But I think because there's yoga, as you practice it with your heart and the feeling, the bhava that you feel that you talked about, and then there's the yoga world. So I think I got caught up in external expectations, this whole corporate world, which I've just been writing about. I'm writing a novel about the yoga world. Just finished it actually.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's fun because I've experienced the yoga world for 25 years. So, I've seen it and done it all. I've seen the good and the bad. And for me, it's very important for people to realize that the yoga world, the corporatization of yoga is like any other workplace. There's assholes in it as well. There's assholes and there's good people like there is in any other workplace. There's corrupt people like there is in any, what not everybody's love and light. Yeah. So I think we have to make a distinction between the yoga, which is of the heart and is very much invisible. It's a personal experience, and the yoga, how yoga has been incorporated in the West and corrupted and commercialized and everything else, the studio system, everything. This is problematic in my view.
Yeah, that's really interesting point. Really good. I suppose it's that perception, isn't it, of what it looks like in the magazines and the nice shiny images and the postures that look completely impossible for the majority of people.
Yeah.
And less focus on what it can do in here. That
Yeah.
it's internal.
Yeah, so my teacher, still my heart teacher, has a saying which I use often, which is in daily life, it's more important to be able to walk than to do a lotus position. Generally, it's more important to be able to connect with your breath and harness the power of the breath than to break out a handstand in your supermarket.
Yeah, and it's so versatile, the breath, in the fact that it can calm, it can soothe us, it can nourish us, it can energize us, can't it? And it's there from the moment that we're born till the moment, our last moment on earth, really. It's really empowering. And I've always taught from that place as well, that it's the breath first.
Yeah, always. Yeah.
What are you experiencing in class? Why are people coming to your yoga class at the moment? What's the main reason for people come? Is it still stress and anxiety, or for a whole lots of different reasons? What's your experiences at the moment?
So my thing is I've become the teacher of the walking wounded, mainly because I am that person with various, the back issues, the stress, the grief process, the knee, hereditary knee issue that I have, the various things that are going on in my body. I think you have to teach what you know. So because I started yoga from a chair and always with different options, that's kind of what I'd known. I certainly wasn't one of the circus/dancer background teachers, which you get a lot of, and they don't always understand what it feels like to be in pain or to ache, whereas I do. So I attract that crowd, the 20, the bendy 20-year-olds who want to break out a handstand, etc. Don't stay with me long. I could show them how to do it. I can do I can do those poses, but for me, it's like, well, why? Is for me, the yoga increasingly, I suppose, as I've gone further into it, it's about the therapeutics. How can we bring the therapeutics of yoga off the mat to improve our daily lives? Whether it's getting things out of the car, picking up grandchildren, just taking us through life. So the fancy poses, yeah, they're fun, they're intriguing. You learn a lot along the way: patience, resilience, sense of humor, etc. Good, useful life tools. But as a means to themselves, for me, there's not much point. So I tend to attract the students who are having issues. It's the body. They can't get past the body usually. It's preventing them from doing things, or it's affecting the quality of life. And I show them ways that they can practice yoga different ways on different days, as something that's going to be a positive tool in their life, to help them feel a bit more peaceful. And for me, that's the only progress towards being a bit more peaceful, as opposed to I need to touch my toes and all the woulds, shoulds, and coulds that kind of we put that Western model of targets and progress onto an Eastern philosophy, and it just doesn't work. So yeah, stress, anxiety, grief, broken arms, broken legs. Another thing that happens is yoga teachers send people to me who they can't accommodate in a class. So that happens as well. So I usually have a room of people on retreats as well. Some are in chairs, some are on a mat, some have got various bits and bats that I've given them that they can use when they're doing the practice. Everyone's usually doing different things.
And for your own practice, does it change over time? Are you drawn to different things at different times, do you think?
That's a good question. Yes, is the short answer, I suppose. I think you go through different stages. So when I first started, I was like, wow, yoga is huge. I want to learn as much as possible. Isn't this intriguing? So I did a hell of a lot of trainings in quite a short period of time. After the British Reel training, I was like, right, off. And I want to do Ashtanga. I want to do wellness, well woman training, or do yin training, hatha, vinyasa. I want to do all of it. So I kind of went through that, kind of reading everything as well, studying, just really studying. I suppose from quite, well, an intellectual, but also a practitioner space. Gone through that phase. It's very unusual now for me to read anything about yoga, because I've got shelves of the stuff. And I certainly have got to the last training I did was by invitation. My yin yoga teacher, Norman Blair, wanted me to do. He had a place in his advanced yin, and I love him and I love yin. So I said, yeah. But I've got to a point now where I wouldn't do any more training. It's all there. Everything's there that I need. So I suppose my daily practice is very bread and butter at times. So depending on what time I've got, it always happens. So I always say to my students, it's happened for the last 12 years, every single day. How it happens is different on different days. So it might be 10 minutes, it might be an hour, it might not be an asana practice, it might be a full-on asana practice. It's an 8-limb practice, so it always happens. If it doesn't happen, things kind of nosedive very quickly. So in terms of mood, capacity for patience, energy levels, so yoga makes me a better person for sure. So I make sure that it happens, and that gives me the juice to then serve others, which I think is the whole point of yoga, to be in a state, once you've dealt with all your own stuff, to be able to be of service.
Amazing. So I'd like to talk a little bit about your writing now. And obviously it was kind of meeting yourself again, on the path. I suppose what I'm particularly interested in is the expansion of it. So where the process of kind of just perhaps writing some poems and then going to like having the book published, and that process, because that's a bit of a journey on its own, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
And there are lots of internal obstacles to overcome, like when you kind of expand into that.
Yeah. So God,
Sorry,
it's been mad, Andrea, really. It's been mad. It's so, of course, I'd put that dream of being a writer to one side. So how it all started was my mum was in a hospice. She was kind of in the last year of her life, really. And my auntie brought her a journal to record. She was experiencing anxiety, as you would, so just to get your thoughts down, etc. She managed to write one pencil entry in this memoir, not in the memoir, sorry, in the diary, in the journal. So I promised her there and then that I would write this journal for her. So myself and Susanna, my partner, we wrote an entry. So then she died, 2018. And I was like, oh, I promised I would write this. So it became, over a 2-year period, a very messy, dramatic, raw record of early grief. And I wrote it every day for 2 years. I read it out so during the pandemic, this is really when I started to do some deep work with myself. So I realized I wasn't coping very well. My mental health had taken a nosedive. Probably for the first time in my life, I'd experienced mental health issues, compounded with OCD, the pandemic. So I was writing this down, and I was also working with cruise bereavement volunteers, teaching them very simple breathing techniques, etc., that they could pass on to, because obviously people were dying, pass on to people supporting grieving people. I read some snippets from the diary, and somebody said, "Oh, this would be so helpful for people to hear." And then that got me thinking, "Oh, okay." So then I spent the next year writing it into something palatable. So just writing up the whole diary. Meantime, I joined Instagram. So I'm quite new, really, to social media. I was a complete Luddite. I wasn't interested. I wasn't on Facebook, nothing until the pandemic. And then I was like, oh, I need to teach on Zoom. I need to learn to teach on Zoom, and I need to stay connected to people. So Susanna, who's a tech queen, kind of got me set up with Instagram. This is where I started to meet the grief communities, which helped me. And this is also where I started to meet the writing community. So I'd kind of gone on there with, oh, I need to promote my yoga classes, but then kind of gone in a different direction. So I started doing poetry prompts just to ease my mind. It's completely anonymous. You submit your poem, you interact with a few people, started kind of building up people that I liked their work. So it was very anonymous. I then saw a call out for, they wanted Northern working class writers to write a poem in dialect. Now, at this point, I'd gone into grief therapy. People on Instagram had advised me about counselors, different things. I said, just go for it. This was a big step for me because I'd believed the narrative about the stigma about it. Oh, you're crazy. What are you doing going into, you put all that aside, found the right therapist after a few false starts. Immediately after my first session, I wrote the first poem that's in the writings, which is Lodged in My Throat. I had all this stuff. I thought I'd gone in to deal with the grief from my mum. I had post-traumatic stress disorder because my mum pretty much died in my arms. So I was dealing with all that, but I ended up having to go way back. And that's when I started doing all the inner child work, stuff I'd never heard of before then. Inner child, find little Emma, somatic healing, gestalt therapy, all sorts of stuff. So I was delving deep. And that's when the poetry started to come. So I started to respond to different things. I wrote a poem about my grandparents because I still hadn't fully grieved my grandma. Submitted that to the publishers, Written Off Publishing, as they're now called. They'd loved it and wanted to publish it in their first anthology, which gave me a boost. I wrote a poem about my mum. I was really missing her. It was really painful. So I got this poem out, submitted it to a journal. They loved it. And they published it. Like, oh, I must be okay at this. So I kind of continued writing for myself at this stage. And basically everything that I wrote for myself is the writings. So it's kind of therapy and getting stuff out is the writings. Very raw, not so much with a technique. There's poems in there like, but it was very much of its time. So that's how it started. And it's just snowballed from there, really. I got a residency at the parsonage. That led to me writing hymns from the sisters in about a 4-week period. I wrote car office because I was in a car office. I was working in the car 2 days a week while Susanna was working during the pandemic. So I wrote about everybody I could see from my car. That became a collection. Then my dad died. So inevitably wrote on the Grace of Strangers just to get all this stuff out again. And then I thought, I'll write a novel. And that's what I've just done. So yeah, I've kind of become a writer by default.
That's an amazing story. And I think the stuff with, the experiences in terms of finding the inner child, I think it finds you when you are ready to do that work. And, it kind of then leads you down other paths that perhaps you didn't quite envisage that you would take. And that's an amazing story. Did you find yourself overcoming fear and anxiety around being a writer?
Not about being a writer, but other fears had come up. So I'd always been scared of heights. I always had a thing. I tried to tackle it at one point and it actually ended up worse. So I thought, I'm not doing that again. Then going into the pandemic, the fear kind of intensified and then kind of started to snowball into, oh, I'm scared now to drive up hills. And I had kind of a traumatic episode really in my birthday where I had to drive up a winding steep road and it absolutely filled me with fear. I came very close to, I actually did have a panic attack, worked through it in therapy. So a lot of the fears started to really encroach during this period. fear of death, fear of losing people because I'd just lost, my anchor. So I was feeling very insecure, very unstable. So I had those kind of fears. I didn't have a fear about writing because I never really thought about writing. I was just doing it because it was the only thing that was helping my head. This internal process, all the therapy was bringing the stuff up, I needed to then get it out, and kind of was like an excavation. Yoga has always been an excavation, but it was a different type. I needed more. This is the other realization. Up until this point, I'd said yoga gives me everything I need. The 8 limbs addresses every single issue in my life. Yes, it did, until my mum died. Then I needed more. I needed an expert to get into my head and help me manage all of that and get out the stuff that needed to come out, different things that had happened in the past. So there was a lot of fears came up, I think, from that process, and fears that now you'll know from my feed, things that I've challenged. Walking up Mount Etna was the latest, challenging that fear of heights head on, and deciding that I wasn't going to be ruled by fear, but I needed to kind of go into a bit of a free fall, a bunker, before I could kind of come out the other side and get to that point and challenge the fear. I still have the fear, I was still in fight or flight, but I was like, I'm not coming down, So I had those fears, but to experience panic attacks, it gave me a whole new compassion and empathy for people who I was connected with on Instagram, who I was like, I'd never had those issues. Yoga had built me up good. I didn't have those issues until my mom. And then so suddenly now when people talk about those things, I express those things, I'm like, yeah, I get it. And it's horrible. I know. I've been there now. I see you. So then it kind of turned into a bit of a mental health page as well. Emma Live Yoga is kind of an umbrella, like the 8 limbs a bit, like an umbrella for all the stuff. Because somebody said to me, well, why don't you have a writing page, have a yoga page, have a nature page, have a mental health? I was like, yeah, but all those things for me are part of who I am. Back to the boxes. I don't want to be in a single box because I'm not just a writer. I'm not just a yogi. I'm all these different, I love art. I love all sorts of stuff. So it's all going under Emma Live Yoga and people can take it or leave it.
That's amazing. And I think it shows, because I've had ideas where I've wanted to fragment them off in different Instagram accounts and things and it just takes too much energy. And really you want to show that true depth of who you are, don't you? And the expansiveness as well.
Yeah.
That the possibility and potential that you hold. And I have to say, hot off the press, you have just won a certificate, haven't you, for a poetry competition? So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Oh, wow. It's been a journey. People have been on my stories, have seen the whole journey unfold. They've seen me crying on the floor. They've seen me go for it, because I'm a sensitive Pisces empath. So I didn't realize when I first started submitting that writing is like 99% rejection. So I took everything like a dagger to the heart. Every single rejection, I was a mess. I take weeks to recover from it. And then I grew a thicker skin. I connected with other writers. How do you handle this? How do you handle a submission? I'm not doing this anymore. Tantrums, all sorts of stuff played out. But I just persevered. So for every rejection, I had to submit. That was the rule. So if latest rejection, I get like 3 or 4 a week, you have to submit something else. So the latest spell, I've had maybe 4 months of rejections. And then suddenly, for some reason, I've had acceptances about 4 or 5 all at once after like a completely dry spell. And this is the first poetry competition that I've won. So I'm really proud of that. And I'm also really pleased that it's with a poem about my dad. And it's a poem that I took a lot of risks with. And somebody from the Instagram community had said to me, you have to write brave. I'm more experienced writing than myself. And I thought, write brave. So write the things that you'd normally censor. And I did nearly censor because there's some very strong language in there, but it's exactly what happened. It's a real story of what happened to me, an incidence of racism in my childhood. My dad, being my dad, had taught me to box, as you do, taught me to fight and defend myself. And I needed it. At the swim class, there was this horrible incident, and I knocked this poor kid clean out. And then I got suspended, even though he'd called me horrible names and threatened me. So and again, this came out through kind of a community thing, because I'd read a poem very similar to my experience, and that kind of led me to write that one. So And I love the fact that it's an anthology, which is all about tackling racism, spotlighting racism in the workplace and the classroom. So for me, I always submit usually to, not for the accolades, but although those are nice, not going to lie, but because it's got a social conscience, it's got something, it's doing something in the world. So this one felt really, really special. I was completely blindsided. I was like, wow, really? And it sounded like, take it. She said, you know how hard you've worked and how much you've submitted. Enjoy the moment. So yeah, I'm currently enjoying the moment.
That's amazing, Emma. Just again, really inspirational, and congratulations on that. It's well deserved. I just have one question left before we finish, and it's, how do you think we can connect people more in our world today? How can we bring people together? At times it just feels so fragmented and disconnected. And how do you think we can help? What could we do?
I think we can use our platforms positively. I know that I avoided social media for a long time for a reason, because it had a bad rap. You know, it had a bad rap as being superficial, people just posting their breakfast or people attacking each other. I was like, I don't want any part of that. My mind has changed massively on that. There's whole communities of wonderful people on there making a difference in the world. And so I think we can use our platforms. And I think we need to be brave in how we use our platforms. For example, you know, calling things what they are. I'm doing a Poet Writers for Peace event. A lot of people are really uncomfortable with that, want to turn away from that. But for me, that's bringing people together, not othering people who are dying or suffering in a different country, saying that they're part of us, you know, they're part of the human race. And if we can help as a yogi, I'm hardwired. If I can help, I have to help. No, that's what I'm here to do. So I think we can use our platforms for good. We can support each other. It doesn't have to be either a grand gesture either. I think, you know, I check in with a lot of people, including yourself, you know, sometimes just commenting on a post or sending a DM, or somebody's sad, sending them a voice note. I think it's very easy to commit small acts of kindness. And I think small acts of kindness can make a huge impact. And certainly the kindness I've received on my platforms made a huge impact to me on some of those challenging days. I think connection can work with social media, as I said, in the real world as well. But I think the two cross over. I've made so many friends via Instagram, which surprised the hell out of me. And I didn't expect that. I've met people, my two best friends I met via Instagram. We've met in real life. You know, there's so many poets and yogis that I've met in real life through the platform. So I think it does, even though it's got a bad reputation, it does foster. I've experienced it as fostering a lot of connection. And I think connection is everything. It's what we need more of. The more we know each other, the less there's going to be potential for hate, misunderstanding, prejudice. And I think we have to find what connects us. But like, well, I'm in a position where I can talk about it and I should talk about it. So that's something I'd written about in stories. I don't think we have to alienate people because they have different views from us. But we shouldn't persecute because we should be able to hold people's different views that are very diametrically different to ours and respect the other person, I think. And for me, that is what connection is.
It's underneath. It's beyond, it's beyond the surface.
Yeah, exactly. And politics, religion, you're always going to have division. There's always going to be division. So you've got to find what's our common ground here. And there always is, like you say, there always is common ground.
It's been a joy talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been wonderful.
It's been great to talk to you. It's been nice to meet you via this as well. It's been connected a while, so great. Yeah, and I love what you're doing with this. You're actively creating connections, which is great to see.
What a great conversation with Emma that was. Takeaways from me for this session: enjoy life to the fullest, persist through rejection, and write brave, and also use our platforms to create connection. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Connection Compass. If you think this episode will help someone, please write a review at podchaser.com. If you have any questions, please let me know on Andrea L. Evans' Facebook page. And remember, keep talking, keep connecting for a more interconnected world.